Welcome back to Side Quests. I'll just say 2026 here, back with our special guest, Otto Lehto, and also with my constant companion and perpetual party member, Wes Chance. Otto, it is wonderful to have you back.
It's absolutely delightful to be back to talk about one of my favorite game series.
Yes, to talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake, integrated in this case, and our three different modes of playing or playing through what we were supposed to play through for this time, which was the train graveyard. I can say that I definitely have played through the train graveyard at least twice in the original Final Fantasy VII. I cannot say that I got through it this time. I can say I watched a playthrough to make up for the time that I missed, but just got back from a really big conference, Otto, and I tried to put around 9 or 10 hours of gameplay into this, and I still didn't quite make it, even though I'm not bad at the game. But that is all just foregrounding the fact that we're very happy to see you. We're happy to talk about a large chunk of this game. It's, I believe, the first time we've talked about it since we talked about it last. Um, but something on the pre-show, we had a really robust pre-show today. And so just to give some FOMO to the listeners, we already covered some excellent ground, but also to give them some FOMO or at least recognition of scarcity. Otto, you were telling me a little bit about your travel schedule. So you were at a conference last week, and then the next couple months look pretty hectic or pretty frantic. You're going all over the place, it seems like. And so we're really happy to have you.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to make the time really for it. It is a bit of a reprieve for me as well. And yeah, well, we just saw each other in Texas at a conference, but it's one of these early career academic boons, but also curses. Sometimes you don't know which one is which, that you have to go out there and gets me travel around. So I'll be doing a few states, going to North Carolina, Virginia, and in the summer I'll be traveling Scotland, UK, maybe
Cool.
going to France as well. I'm not sure, and spending time in Finland where I'm from. But the Finland part is really just relaxation, friends, family, sauna for sure.
Okay.
That's the important part.
Very
But
good.
yeah,
Video games?
here, bring out my tradition for Pro. I'm still in the process of switching to PS5. I might still have one more of PS4 Pro in me because I only have a PS4 in Europe. So I always, bring that out and continue whatever I was doing last summer, which might actually be playing through Yakuza Like a Dragon, Yakuza 7. Because I wanted to get through that, but Rebirth is high up on my agenda. The problem is that for that I would need PS5, so I'm not sure if I will get to it. I would really hope so. Maybe I'll have to borrow one. Or as I was reading the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau's autobiography recently, I maybe also steal one, but I don't recommend it. But Rousseau talks about how tempting it is to steal stuff. So if I see a PS5, I might just pick one up. But anyway, I do want to get to Rebirth eventually because I've been waiting for years and years to get to it.
We've got to get a GoFundMe going for both of you because I know that Wes is trying to get a Switch too, and you're trying to get a PS5, and that'll give you both the ability then to play Rebirth on the various consoles it's licensed on. Though you will, of course, have the mighty PS5 Auto with the greatest specs, which
Yeah, I'll try to get the Pro because it has some pretty good in some games it doesn't make much of a difference, but I think in Rebirth and some others it does make a kind of a nice difference in graphics as well.
it may well because something that I'm constantly noticing playing between like PS1 ports onto the PS3, like Chrono Trigger, we're about to finish talking about tomorrow, and then also playing on my Switch One, but then playing on the mighty PS5, where the renderings from an internal environment to an external environment, which would generally take seconds of load time, there is literally no load time. It like the lighting changes a little, and I go from one to the other. In particular, in Aerith's Edenic slum dwelling, the flower in the slum, pretty nose on the head. Well, I do want to talk about that notion a little bit with you because we just went through that. But okay, Otto, so you have a crazy couple months coming up, but you are happy to hang out with us at Aerith's home, as it were, the Edenic sanctuary away from the madness of Midgar and all that's going on. Wes, I know that you have been going through this game a little bit differently. I think following Professor Noctis's God mode playthrough.
Mhm.
I did see where those features are accessible in my PS5 version too, by the way, but I have not yet used them because, again, if you're good at the game, you can be really good at this game.
Yeah.
And which I appreciate. You would be, I think, amazing. I'm just now learning how to use all three characters and all their abilities at once. And Otto, I want to ask you about that, but you are not playing the game yet.
No.
But yeah, so please tell us a little bit about your experience because I think I have a lot to say about my experience playing this game, and then I'm
Okay.
interested in talking about comparing Final Fantasy VII to Final Fantasy VII Remake from all of our perspectives.
Sure. Yeah, it's a bit disorienting because I'll tune in to a stream occasionally live, and then, that's one kind of experience. And then often I'll just watch, recordings of it later, and then I'll put it on while I'm doing something else, and I'll essentially treat it more like a podcast, and I'm just kind of listening to not just his commentary, but what's going on in the game, what's going on with the voice acting, with the sound effects and the music and things like that. And then I'll like look over from time to time to see what it looks like, visually. And so it's not like a very high fidelity experience to what this really is. And at the same time, it's my attempt to at least maintain some familiarity with where the series has gone in the, 20 years since it came out, 30 years maybe. So in the train graveyard, for example, like I know that there's a lot of discourse surrounding this section of the game because people, even in the original game, would get stuck. They would get confused about
Yes.
how to
Oh,
proceed.
oh, I hated that so
Um,
much.
I don't know. I mean, it's also very short. Like if you know what you're doing, it's almost forgettable because there isn't a whole lot to it. But it's obviously much expanded, like pretty much everything in the remake, and becomes this whole, elaborate maze. There's also some important story development with what's going on with these ghosts and how they're related to all of the memories that like are sort of front loaded in the remake. Um, I think that Professor Noctis's theories on that and his interpretation of what's going on there are interesting, and I don't feel like they're the last word on it by any means, but I'm happy to kind of formulate some thoughts around that and think through, what are the developers doing with this section of the game and how does it fit into the bigger project of the remake? Because it doesn't really factor in much to the original game, to be honest. It's just kind of a way station between what for me are more memorable sequences with like, the whole Don Corneo and that the wall market thing, and then the sewers are forgettable too. But then you come through this, and then you have like the end of Seventh Heaven and Sector 7 Slum getting wiped out, right, by the fall of the plate. And by then you're pretty much into a very different section of the game. Yeah.
And yeah, the sky literally is falling
Mhm.
on you. Some strong mythological tropes here. So, cloud falling from a bridge after Barrett says, I was wrong about you, but basically trying to close the book on him. And Cloud says, well, we're not dying today. But he falls through a roof onto a bed of flowers. These are lilies, made famous at the very least in Dante's work, where he has the angels sing forth a quote from Virgil's Aeneid, Date manibus plenia, and I guess Lilia, but give with full hands, lilies. And Beatrice is associated with the lily, and what Cloud falls on are white and yellow lilies. Actually, included an image, I believe, from this. It might have been Advent Children in an article I wrote on
Mm.
Final Fantasy VII, which it really should have been from the original because I wasn't talking about the adaptation, but maybe I'll be able to make up for that. But then, so not only do we have Sky falling a little bit later, but we have Guy falling through church roof, ruined church roof, and so there are churches in this world, and so there's some sort of religion, and we don't yet know. We know, but that much about the Cetra and the Ancients and Aerith's tragic backstory. Um, though Cloud did have a really interesting Mako reaction where he seemed to see her dropping the holy materia, which it's hard to say whether that's a future vision or this strange interdimensional sort of vision that some people are suggesting with the whispers. And that's maybe something I should ask you two about, particularly you, Otto. These whispers. I guess we fought them the first time near Seventh Heaven, and this is how Jesse got injured, and that's how I ended up on the second mission when I was supposed to be cut loose. But I kind of fight them. It seems sort of pointless. There are like infinite quantities of them, and then there's a special one that I have to fight against, and then they just keep kind of showing up. And it seems like Aerith can see them. I can see them. I don't think anybody. Well, Barrett was shooting at them, so I guess all some of my friends can see them. But this kind of just goes to where I got to with my last point. You know, when Cloud is having these strange Mako visions or whatever they are, having a reaction to one of the numbered Sephiroth clones. Do you think this is him seeing something that's related to his world or an interdimensional world that is in some way connected to the original Final Fantasy VII? What do you think the function of these whispers is? What are they trying to signify to us?
Well, for me also, I'm experiencing visions of both the past and the future because I've played through the game, also the original game and also the remake. If I think I played through the remake. It's been a few years now since I last played it, but I played through it 1.5 times. So I played through it first on normal, and then I played through it about halfway through on hard. I got stuck
Wow.
in something when I was playing on hard, but I really enjoyed it up to that point anyway. But what the visions signify is kind of hard to say without completely trying to ignore the fact that I know more about the context having finished the game. But I think it's really fascinating about how they play because they also bring some parity in a way between Cloud and Aerith, who both are visionaries. That is, they are both they both have a connection to either memories or visions of some kind. We also see Cloud in this remake having visions of Sephiroth quite early on. And the whispers are something interesting that are not in the original game. I think they play they're part of the breadcrumbs that are put in the way of the player to keep you guessing a bit. So I think up till this kind of getting to the point where you start revealing a bit more about them, and I think the train graveyard section also helps you to think a little bit about kind of the link between visions and past and the future and reality. It's kind of interesting how they do stuff there. And overall, I mean, it's clear that in the world of Final Fantasy, there's a lot of things that we don't know, a lot of things that are not on the surface, but you have to go through them either to the psyche of the people, the characters, or you have to find something in the world that reveals you something about what's really going on. And I think that's part of the mystery. And as those who played the first game, the original game, know that the whole game really is about memories and about both very old memories and very recent memories and the different visions of the future. So I think all of these themes are playing into what the Whispers are doing as well.
Interesting.
Let me also ask. I like to have a question to Wes about this Professor Noctis. What university did Professor Noctis get his professorship doctorate from? And also, is he a professor of Final Fantology or?
I think he is actually a religious studies PhD of some kind. I don't know if it's a theology or yeah, something in that general area. And so his job, I think he's at the University of Alabama. He works within their sort of student services and specifically like religious, um, yeah, mentorships and things like that. I don't know if he's the head of that organization on campus or he's just involved in it in some way. But he also teaches classes And his classes incorporate, I think primarily like Final Fantasy 15 is the
Well,
one that
Noctis
Noctis.
would be the character from
Yeah.
15.
So that's the one that he likes the best. But he also
Huh,
has
that's a
done a
hard
lot
take.
of
Wow.
a lot of streaming over the years. He's done a lot of streaming on earlier games like FF4, and then 7. Of course, he is really into 10. He did a big, series on. I think he's done shorter ones on tactics and maybe even 16. And I know that he has, written his dissertation on um, the the kinds of parallels or resonances that he sees between the story in 15 and the story of biblical
Hmm.
kings. So like the narratives in Samuel and Kings and maybe Chronicles even. I'm not sure what exactly he's looking at there. I did talk to him a bit and I read his dissertation, but it's been years now. So he's legit and he does a really good job of not like focusing too much on theory crafting per se, but really like sort of just playing the game and as he plays it, like pausing every so often to just give little, questions or address things and help to weave together you know, things that he cares about have to do with themes of religion as they show up in the games, obviously, but also what the games themselves have to say. Like so, this whole theme of memory or identity, or just kind of the relationships that we see forming here. This is kind of the first time that Cloud, Tifa, and Eris have all been together, right? And they're kind of having to get to know what that configuration is going to be like. Obviously, this is a big thing for the fans as well. So he loves engaging with the fans on all that as well.
That's really great. I also appreciate that there are more people doing work on, looking at Final Fantasy and religion. And, we, Alex, of course, is doing good work around this as
Yes.
well. And just to sort of give you a hint about also the future, maybe a premonition about the future. Once people have beaten the game, I highly recommend, but only after beating the game, also recommend looking at Maximilian Dude's in-depth videos on
Mm.
Fantasy VII Remake. He goes into really deep theorizing about that, and he's done some of the best videos on this, but only after you've seen the game because he really spoils everything. So you need to know what's going on.
Gotcha.
Okay, I'm really looking forward to that. And you should know that we're going to start on Final Fantasy Tactics Evilise Chronicles pretty soon. So I know you don't have any time, but if you're interested in talking on that one, that's sort of the parallel that we like to keep with side quests. A more modern game and an older game. And if the modern game happens to have a tremendous connection to an older game, all the better.
Well,
Uh,
I probably won't have time to do much on that, except I will say that it is a great game, and I think you're going to love it. And it has one of the deepest stories, one of the most impactful stories in Final Fantasy history for sure.
Okay, so I feel like we've primed the pump a little bit, and I want to give one of my hot takes for this game. So I've played a lot of this Final Fantasy VII remake, and one thing I need to caveat is I'm dying very rarely because I'm playing pretty well, and I'm not even looking at a strategy guide that often. Occasionally for a little bit of advice, but honestly, it doesn't feel as necessary as with a traditional like Final Fantasy VII, 8, or 9, where like you might really need it. And I might eat my words later, almost certainly. But something I have to say about just the experience, the phenomenology of playing this game is that I don't love it yet. It's sort of annoying. And Cloud being like, whatever, I'm not here for this. Like when I'm like I most recently had to do this chore where I had to take flowers to some orphans, and I get this is building up pathos and this is re-meeting Aerith for the first time, and I'm supposed to be like heart beating out of my chest. I get it. But I'm really trying to get to where I'm saving the world. And I'm also not appreciating, I think, this modern conceit in RPGs where they go for large and long without soul and they don't move the plot forward. So like this, I just went through this dungeon in Shinra, which was basically I had to turn on these three lamps, and it was so onerous doing this, really not plot driven task, and then going through all these antechambers before fighting this boss. And these bosses, they have several sort of levels to them. It takes a bunch of minutes to beat them, but they're not really that hard yet. There's like this aspiration towards magnitude and gargantuanism, or being gargantuan, that kind of artificially extends moments for me and leads to me as a plot driven player, when this Wes can attest to, like I miss a lot of content because I want to get to the plot. Well, my wife was watching me play and she was like, oh, now you're going to go kill some more were rats. And I was like, that's what it feels like right now. I don't feel like deeply engaged in this mission to defend the planet, or that I'm sort of cynical about, but becoming more hopeful about as I interact with these people on a human level. I feel like I'm like running through some boring dungeons, and especially boring because I've played Expedition 33 now, and it's gorgeous and dynamic in its locales. And so I kind of am like, hurry up, game. I'd like to get to the interesting parts, has been my feeling. While also, I'll throw this out too. I've felt a little cold fish towards both Tifa and Aerith. I'm not sure if they ever passed the Bechtold test, but especially not in this Final Fantasy VII remake so far for me. But I want to ask about your own experience, because, and again, I have played Kingdom Hearts. I do play action RPGs. It's not just the fact that it's not turn-based. I like the combat fun, I would say. Caveat.
Well, there's a lot there, right?
Yes.
So
I hope.
well, I mean, so one is the battle system, right? So we can talk about that. I mean, I think it's great. I think it pretty much kept me interested throughout the whole game. They keep on adding new things to it, and the more you get control over the party members, you can really create the sort of party that you want. I mean, of course, there are lots areas where you're stuck with a particular set of characters, because especially in the first game, it's not a massive party, right? I mean, but I think all the characters have their unique styles, move sets, in a way that makes them very different from each other. And the way that you can give controls both real time and pausing the game really gives you a lot of different options of how to approach things. I like having quick buttons for special attacks or
Oh, you can do
or
that. I
skills.
haven't done that yet. Ah,
I mean, that just seems that keeps things very interesting, because you have to like keep track of many things at once, but also yeah, I mean, there's a big difference between normal and hard. So
hmm.
playing on normal, it's pretty, it's not, you don't die too often. In On hard, you really have to conserve everything. But I don't recommend starting on hard. But I think that gives really good replay value to play it on hard. Um, and no, I guess I cannot say I agree with much of what you said about about relating to this. I mean, I guess it's just a matter of opinion in a way. But I think um I mean, so I mean, of course, one issue is that to what extent you want to have plot move along quickly versus dwell on issues and details, and that dwelling can be separated into two parts. One of them is dwelling for the sake of exploring more about the characters, exploring more about the locales, making them bigger, have you more dialogue about characters who didn't have dialogue much before. Introduce a few new characters, not too many, but there's a few new characters in remake.
Sadly.
And
Roach.
Roche, yeah, he's not my favorite character. But pretty forgettable, but also not too offensive, I don't think. One of the things that I one of the things that I really like what they do with the characters is that they, for example, build a lot between the Avalanche members. I think you really get to see much more about the relationship between the different characters, including the side characters. And I think they all have a lot of personality, and they are given options to really make you feel like you're part of something that's been there for a long time, that has a lot of things going on, that we still don't get to see you know, there could be a whole game just about the background story of Avalanche, right? There's so much there, but we do see a bit more than we did in the original, and I think, with all the characters, I think they did a fabulous job just making them faithful to the original source material, while also making them more up to standard with contemporary RPG graphical and other styles. So no, I think I think I think a lot of depends on the enjoyment of the game is how much you care about the big plot versus you care about the small things. And for me, what I love about it is it's a 7-hour section from the original game turned into a 50-hour RPG. And that comes with a few annoyingly expanded sections, like the sewers. Like, I think they're too long. And there's a few other dungeons maybe that are a bit too long, but I honestly didn't find that too much of a problem, because aside from the sewers, where you don't really have a sense of like, oh, I'm getting so much like new context for the sewers, so like, I don't need more context for the sewers. But I think with all the other ones, even with the reactors, I do enjoy. It's been a while since I played through them, but I think overall I do enjoy the sense of, like you said, gargantuan. But that's how I felt about playing the original game. Is that everything has huge scale, and I think they make that more vivid. And yeah, this is much more can be said about different aspects of it. We can talk about different aspects at a time or in unison, but I know, and I'm kind of, yeah, I'm sad you don't feel for Aerith and Tifa. I think they're really well made. And both like how they look, how they behave, and also how their relationship develops, especially from chapter 9 onwards. And I think there's a lot there that's really sweet, and that's really appropriate for their background stories, that's hinting at things to come, and that's giving kind of even higher stakes for some of the things that are happening in the game. So
Yeah.
anyway, I think we just like are on different places about this.
Well, and I think really my qualms might be like, when does it pick up? And I know that you have a retrospective view now, but the thing is, I think when I was first playing through this, I did have a lot more nostalgia activated, and that did change my experience, especially with I had a lot more appreciation of the first times. And I do also understand the pleasure of engaging in a deeper way with a more magnificent representation of the original world, if one buys that that's what's happening. So there's an assumption baked into that experience as well, which is that it's a faithful representation, or at least a faithful enough representation to warrant that level of engagement and appreciation. I guess a different perspective from adaptation theories might just be that it's newly created stuff. It's still under the same like, so when I think about the orphans that we meet, and also Chadley, but it makes me wonder what the limits are of adapting the original material. Is it, and this goes into even translation theory, right? So is one just trying to adapt certain scenes, or is one sort of trying to give the original sense, or is one trying to give a sense even beyond the original sort of aesthetic experience that was not, that one could not envision or actually deliver on, given the original constraints of the technology and the team sizes and all of that. So in some ways the adaptation might also reflect the adaptation of the industry and the specialization and the enlargement of the teams, and that which they're capable of delivering on. But how much of that is representation of the original game? That said, just to argue against myself a little bit. If it is a spiritual sort of, if it is supposed to be a spiritually sound or parallel or faithful adaptation, if they actually strove with that in their minds, the limits of developing something spiritually, and I think this is what you were touching on being a pleasure in this game, are pretty fuzzy and can be pretty large. It's like, well, Mikar is going to have to be a lot larger. They're going to have to be a lot more characters, and it's actually an indication that this game is well loved, that there are lots of characters you can interact with in different ways, and there's new content that means that you can explore the city in your mind from when you were young, or if you're meeting it for the first time, this amazing city. But it 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 is the part off the maps that was always there, but can only now be uncovered through exploration. Even though there's a lot that seems sort of extra to one's original or to one's originalist sort of perceptions, it's all under the same spiritual umbrella, and that makes for I think a player like you, and probably a player like Wes, and soon I'm sure a player like me, really love the experience of being immersed in the world and being able to be immersed in a way that maybe you couldn't be in the original experience. Though, even though I want to say the original experience still got me, even though the train graveyard was terrible because I could not figure out what was a ladder and what was a bridge. Pre-rendered backgrounds are difficult, and that is something about the original that this game I think does a little better. There are not as many just super annoying parts when you have no idea what you're supposed to do, or where to go or where the exit is. Pulling those levers all at once was pretty annoying, though, I'll say, right before fighting the airbuster. That reminded me of the original game. But yeah, all that goes to say is that I take your point and I understand it. And I also am looking forward to playing Rebirth, which I hear is the better game. And so hopefully by the time we get through this or near that time, you guys are getting to your next gen consoles and get excited about playing that game. But okay, all that said, Otto, I think we've had a good conversation so far, but we brought you on to talk about the train graveyard. And Wes made the point earlier, and I think also in the pre-show, that the train graveyard is not a very big part of the original game. It's sort of an annoying part, but can be gotten through really quickly after going through the sewers, which, as you mentioned, even though we get the sewers in a lot of Final Fantasies, Final Fantasy VIII too, it tends to be an onerous, sort of annoying, repetitive part that doesn't add a lot to one's experience of the game. And so, but from these sewers, we come to a train graveyard, which in the original, I don't even know if we mentioned it in our original podcast, Wes. I doubt we had a show on the original train graveyard, but here we get something a little bit more expanded. So, under the umbrella of our most recent discussion on adaptations, we get a lot more from the train graveyard. And we're there with two people who, Otto, you mentioned, are sort of Dostoevsky-esque and have sort of visions. Cloud is especially Dostoevsky-esque, whereas Aerith, so something, again, to your point earlier about the different fighting styles, she's so magical, and this is something Remake does really well, that her attack is magic. She doesn't even waste time hitting people now. She shoots magic without any MP cost. And so you really, really get the impression that she's special from the get-go. And she's pretty strong. And all the characters to fight with, by the way, and Wes, I'm sorry that you haven't had this yet, are all pretty strong. Like Tifa is incredibly strong. And so fighting, you have incentive to fight with the different characters and to sort of see what it's like. And Aerith is pretty strong too. And so it's kind of fun to mess with them. But so the train graveyard, we get here where it's one of these moments with both Aerith and Tifa. And well, I guess my first question is going to be a more expansive question, Otto. Why is it that this moment, of all the moments in the game, and as you've mentioned, you've played the whole game, all 50 hours or so, and you have a more holistic perspective on it so far. Why is it that you specially wanted to come on and talk about this moment in the game?
Well, I think this moment is a bit of a quiet, um, quiet, uncertain moment that helps you to kind of take a step back from the big things happening in the game. Um, there's a lot of big things in the past, a lot of big things in the future, and what's going on here is that you have for the first time the full trio of the ladies and Cloud together, and you have both really starting in the sewers already. You start having a bit of a sense of their personalities, how they relate to each other, some dialogue between them. Some of it is happening in cutscenes, some of it is happening just during gameplay as they're walking around, which I also like. So you sort of get a bit of development all the time.
Yes.
And the train graveyard. So I will say this. I think chapters 10 and 11 are probably for me the weakest part of the whole remake.
Okay.
Because I think they are it's the sewers, and the train graveyard is not as bad as the sewers, but I think it's quite long, and I think it does feel a bit for some people, definitely people who maybe you who lack patience about some of the things. It's going to be it's one of those things that test patience because um, it's not advancing the story obviously in an obvious way, but as it turns out, I think what it's really doing is it's giving you a sense of who the characters are, how their relationship develops over time and deepens, how their bonds deepen, how also Tifa and Aerith kind of like get to be friends, which is kind of cool to see happening gradually over time, and especially when you start having a bit more of a sense of the childhood of Aerith. You've already seen some stuff from childhood of Tifa as well,
Mhm.
and there's not much we don't know about Cloud's past too. So there's the sense of connecting to literally the ghost. I mean, so the train graveyard is haunted, and we already have the whispers, right? And then we have kind of a version of that same theme here with the various ghost elements, and I think that's really meaningful also thematically because it helps to connect again because it there's literally something that's haunting us from the past. And I think there's a lot of things that are haunting Aerith, a lot of things that are haunting Tifa, and dealing with the literal hauntings in the graveyard, you're also dealing with the personal hauntings of the different characters. And then you start getting a bit of the flashbacks, you start getting a bit of um, a sense of the deep emotional connection that Aerith has to everybody. I mean, Aerith is an empath, and that's part of her Cetra lineage as well, but it's also maybe her personality, and that helps her to connect both to Tifa and Cloud to be empathetic to what they're going through, to also be optimistic and hopeful because Aerith is always a mixture of empathy and hope, and dealing with some of the 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 rather dark the dark story that's going on in the sub story that's going on here in the graveyard, once you realize that actually like literally like children and dead people who are kind of trapped in this place, and you end up have to kind of having to liberate them. um that's really kind of a chance for that power of healing and hope and empathy that Aerith represents to come through. And it also helps her to connect to Tifa as someone who also is struggling with a lot of demons and ghosts of the past.
That, yeah, sorry, go please, Wes.
So, yeah, I'm thinking of other points in the game where we hear a little bit about these kinds of hauntings. And obviously, the biggest is Sephiroth. He's supposed to be dead, and yet he is evidently not, or not entirely. So that's one, right? And then the other one that's coming to mind is the stuff in Cosmo Canyon with the Gi clan, right? They are all undead, and you can actually defeat the final boss of that section with a Phoenix down in classic Final Fantasy fashion, right? But it's classic for a reason, right? Every game there's some element of this kind of undead or dark type of enemy. They often are related to necromancy or some other sort of evil spiritual power at work within the world of the game. And so much of this game in particular is about the question, what happens after death, right? And in terms of the biography of the developer, Sakaguchi famously has talked about how this is him still processing the loss of his mother, um, and in doing that through the story of the life stream of the planet, right? And so whatever the ghosts are in the train graveyard, um, whatever power is keeping them stuck there, right, such that they haunt that place, Aerith's connection to it is something like a vision for, I guess, what the game is trying to instruct players in, right? Having us have a connection to um, powers that transcend life and death. Sorry,
No, no, no. I think that's really interesting. I hadn't made the Cosmo Canyon connection with the Yi yet. I did make a connection with the presence of a train and, of course, the famous suplex of it from Final Fantasy VI. We don't get quite that, but these guys are highly stylized. They have sort of what like blacklight graffiti features and do sort of blacklight graffiti as well. And so there's an eeriness to this. It's interesting that you mentioned hope and empathy with Eric because the memory that she sees, that's the tragic memory, is of being left alone, which is, of course, the worst thing you can do to an empath and an extrovert who's hopeful. As somebody writing a dissertation right now who's more like that, I can attest to it. But there's besides having to sort of relive some of their greatest tragic moments or their saddest moments that seem to bring them down even in the moment. And that's an interesting power of memory, and therefore what a ghost can do, insofar as a ghost is tied to the affective experience in the present of being drawn down by a memory from the past. And that would be their power in the mise en scène of the game. The game itself makes sense. But something I just want to mention that I think this game, and I'm connecting it to the original game in does masterfully, and I think it's really masterfully done by a song that I'm forgetting the name of, but has harp, but it's sort of the gloomy song. It's like blum blum blum. I can't really hum it. It's tough. But is that even though something good happens at the end of this, there's bonding. The souls seem to be freed from this Shang Tsung-esque locale. They're dead children. And so the situation itself is gloom, is somber, is morbid. And that's something about the Final Fantasy VII world that I would say I love, and that it is very much a post-war, pre-war. It's not post-apocalyptic. The apocalypse hasn't come, but it's pretty close to the apocalypse. It's apocalyptic, you might say. It's very much like the early Christian Paul thought he was living in that time, but it actually is that time here. And so things are gloomy. And so when Hope or Lily shows up, it really is special. But then there's yet another layer of gloom underlying the fact that we know what this is prefiguring. Seeing ghosts with Aerith, it is a memento mori that hits us straight in the heart, because we know, even if this is going to be new and unfaithful in certain ways, that's one choice that it would be inexcusable for the developers to make, would be to remove the death of Aerith, which is the most emotionally significant moment in the original game and maybe in all of video game history. And so this does an excellent job of bringing that basically to the foreground of our minds, because we've met her, we're developing a relationship, whether we're seeing the relationship with Tifa, and then boom, actually remember what is definitely coming. Not quite as soon as you expect, because this game's going to get split into three, but it is coming. And so that is something I appreciate, besides the aesthetic of the train graveyard and the ghosts themselves.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And the link between the memory of the characters and the memory of the players is also important here, because there's a lot of meta narrative going on about whose memory are we talking about? Are we talking about the collective memory?
Ah,
People who've played the original game. So I think the game is aware of its presence as something that a lot of people were waiting for years and years, and that people have a context for. And even people who have not played the original, many people, not everybody, I still meet people or see people who don't know what happens in the original game before they play this game, which I think is pretty astonishing at this day and age, but it does happen. But I think most people are roughly aware of the key story points, certainly that one, the big one.
yes.
So bringing that into and bringing Sephiroth also quite early on is to say, we know, this could be a collective memory of the players that we're playing.
Mm.
This is not this is Final Fantasy VII, but this is the kind of the second coming of Final Fantasy VII, right? And it's the second coming. It comes with it some of the collective memories that we have, not just the nostalgia, but also the fear of the unknown.
Mhm.
And are we good? Do we really want to go through this thing again? Do we want to
These
see this?
sewers again?
Yeah, and I think that's what they do so well here, is that they keep you kind of guessing about first of all what's the same, what's different, and also is the order of things different? Do we have choice? Do we have choices here
Mm.
about actually maybe maybe things will come out differently in some of the story moments, we don't know. And the brain graveyard, yeah, connects us to all of those things in the past. And I think there's also more context to some of the childhood of Aerith in this game, that I think there's also some more coming, I think, a bit later. If I forget the exact order in which they come, but there's definitely some like more flashback scenes that are in this game for all the main characters. And I think they work really well to build that context. And the train graveyard also takes place, like you said, just before things that also people who played the original, and also this game tells you there are bad things about to happen
Yes.
already. And we don't see what's going on with Barrett and so on, but there's also the parallel between Barrett and Marlene, the worry about Marlene, and Tifa is obviously worried about that. So children are in danger, right? And that's being kind of played here in the train graveyard, in a kind of sort of safe supernatural environment, but there's a real threat going on.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so like it's a prefiguration in the collective unconscious in some ways of what is about to happen, and that is embodied in Tifa's sort of present hallucination in the figure of Marlene, who is also one of those people. And so, yeah, the personal relationship brings out the tragedy of you know, the tragedy is how many people are feeling, well, not only how many people are lost, but how much collective emotion is released in a moment
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
Let me also say one thing about defending kind of the stuff about the orphanage and things, because I think also that's for me that stuff worked really well,
Okay.
because it helps to bring some of the context
Yes.
of caring for and protecting children, and the whole idea that there's life, the flowers coming from the ground, and there's like there's place for children in this world, no matter how difficult things are. And I think that's a key theme of the whole game.
And the futility of living in that world where the people in power can just, like Atropos, Clotho and Lachesis just snip the life, that you've put, the garden that you've tilled, that you've worked to grow can just be taken away. And so that is itself, I think, in microcosm, because that seems like the entire world, right? When you're first playing the game. And then it turns out actually there's an even greater evil that's trying to do this on a macro scale. So, yes, it is the case that really Shinra kind of seems to run the entire globe, and Wutai's the only threat, and they're not much of a threat. They seem to have been quelled. They're more of a rhetorical flourish at this point than a good excuse to do what they want to do anyway. But then when Sephiroth really gets in power with Meteor, you realize how little their control. And then when the weapons show up, of course, too, you see how little control they ever had, and yet they have complete control over these individuals. So you do see a profound level of disenfranchisement in this post-war slash war slash apocalyptic game. I mean, yeah, I think that's, if I were to speak against our age compared to I mean, this current age compared to, say, the millennial gamer age, I would say that it is the heaviness of these concepts that magnetizes the game to us, that draws us in, that it is like a meaning generator, especially in a modernist or postmodernist time, that wow, there are these humongous issues. There are profound social issues in this game, and we just try and fight against the power, and we see the impact of that. We actually make it worse at first. They get crushed. People we know, people we put time into, people Aerith in particular, and Tifa, not Cloud as a proxy for us, a little bit less. But yeah, right. There's real impact. And so I can't wait to feel that and then to report back on it. But that is something that attracted me into this game. This struck me as the right way to live when I was growing up. I was like, well, you should be fighting against the biggest possible, bad enemy, and try and you know do your best. But this game also is very, I think, pragmatic in saying that, well, there's going to be a lot of failure along the way, and also many costs. As many of our friends would say, many transaction costs here. Um,
Thinking about that a little bit, like I think the way that the game ends in the original game, right, is really interesting because it does look like Meteor is going to annihilate much of the planet's, life, and possibly catastrophically damage it. Um, it is something that the party is trying to stop by stopping Sephiroth himself, right? And that while we defeat Sephiroth, we don't stop Meteor. It's too late. And it's only after the like all hope seems lost. And this is also drawing a connection with Marlene. Like we see her at that
yes,
window looking
yes.
out, right? So she's there again. It's again this like this most innocent, this most
Hmm.
vulnerable, character who's kind of our point of view or a point of reference. But then it's through the power of the life stream, and it seems like Aerith is involved in some kind of personal way, but of course that collective, again, life of the planet and its people that pushes back and staves off the ultimate disaster. Um, so that, you know, that generative power of life is upheld there at the end of the first game, the original game. And I think, that this game uh, is on a trajectory to get to that same point. But what it seems interested in with the whispers and with like making sections like this a bit longer and more involved is like complicating or filling out a portrait of like what is the life stream and how is Aerith related to it? How
Hmm.
are we as players involved in these events, right? Like you're saying, Otto, do we actually have agency, or is the illusion of agency something that the whispers are like representing, right? Like the fact that they tend to keep things on a certain track, right? They sort of are arbiters of fate in that way, or destiny, right? And that seems like something that the games are really interested in and are doing something meta with, right? But if we are like, to use the the Cloud phrase, like we're on this train and there's no stopping it, or whatever, then ultimately it does feel like um, the the experience of a Marlene, of an Aerith, of Cloud and Tifa even, um, is really there to, yeah, give the player a feeling that their actions do matter, and that that's something that we can actually apply in real world circumstances, right? Whether it's just dealing with the inevitability of death, like Sakaguchi and his mom, or whether it has something more to do with relationships with other people, maybe romantic ones, or whatever you know, whatever kinds of forms that might take, up to and including, I guess, political ones and economic ones probably, right? Like we're seeing how these choices of the characters play out and how complicated they are and how we are implicated in that.
Mm.
So yeah, I guess I'm just trying to say, like, I feel like the game, by highlighting, by centering the experience of children as kind of vulnerable, is it does seem like it's giving the players um, decisions or their involvement a little bit more weight, and it's like there's like a moral arc to this game, which again I think is going to be conserved, and whatever might change in the remake, I think will just serve to complicate but not like ultimately challenge that optimistic view.
Mm. Well, I just to come back to the mundane, like meteor to the planet. Since I didn't really foreground this, because this is the second time we've talked to you, Otto, so this will show up after the first talk. I do want to say a little bit about you. This is, of course, Dr. Otto Lehto, postdoctoral fellow at I always get this wrong, the Center for Bioethics at New York University, and also the Classical Liberal Institute. You have about 15 articles published, have started your own podcast, which is what I actually wanted to say. And if you want to say something about that, that'd be cool. It's a little bit different from the focus here, but I think is also good watching and very noble and accessible way to get insight into what some of these scholars are doing. So not everybody has the time to go to a university or knows how to go to the relevant talks, but you make that very accessible. And of course you got your PhD in political economy from King's College London. And so I did want to mention all of that. It'll all be in summary too. You'll have a very nice swathe of links and underneath the video as well. But yeah, I wanted to give you time to mention that at the end here after. I think Wes, you really put a nice cherry on top of what I think has been a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, yeah, I do hope that people check out my podcast if they're interested in philosophy and economics and politics, those kind of issues we talk about there. Yeah, so check it out. Also, I think this is a really exciting place to kind of have the conversation, because it is a bit of a lull in the game, but I think it's an important lull, and I think it thematically works because it helps to accentuate the connections between people, bring back the kind of, because I think just like kind of like why I have a bit of a different take on all of this thing is I think the worst way to play this game is to hurry through it, because
Okay. Okay.
I think really the little things matter. I mean, not everything, not every sewer rat is a deep metaphysical revelation, but I think I think the little details, the little dialogue pieces, also some of the characters in the background, you can like walk past them and they have some likes of dialogue. I think that can be pretty interesting about what's going on in the world. But overall, I think what's going on here is that we're getting a sense of what the stakes are, who these characters are, how they bond to each other, how they bond to the earth, to the location, how they are really citizens of Mythica, but specifically of these particular sectors and these particular classes in that society. They're not part of the elite, and they are part of this kind of underground that is looked down upon, but is and is under threat of various types of oppression. I mean, Oppressed People was the name of one of the original tracks of the original game that
Hmm.
that is used here. I think in there's a couple of really nice uses of that track in the highway sections in the remake. But yeah, so I think all of this is kind of like building momentum, building tension, and then there's going to be some momentous things happening also in the future.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and I will take your advice and slow down. And I was actually telling my wife that had this been my original experience, I would have been looking at every detail and grant and really appreciating it. And so maybe I do need to do more of that. Get over my own assumptions that the detail or the care are not there because perhaps they really are. And and yeah, it seems like we're going to have you on sooner than later if this is in fact a 50-hour game. Then I'm only a fifth of the way through it. And a long time to change my mind on some things. And we've been noticing lately that my mind does change on things. Hopefully not too frequently, but enough to stay flexible. Um, but it would be wonderful to have you back again, Otto. I really appreciate you making this time for us before you have your own golden saucer moment today, or as it turns out, this weekend. Um,
I'm
uh,
going chocobo riding, yes.
yes, very good. And
Wow.
yeah, and you too, Wes, because I know that you also have this is we're recording on Saturday, so I know that you gentlemen both have a lot going on. I happily, in my dissertation writing days, do not, but maybe unhappily, but that's where I am, and we'll soon be out of this waiting for Godot-esque torment, which I actually saw when I was in New York and saw you last time, Otto, with Keanu Reeves and Bill Winters. Bill and Ted.
Whoa.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, any final thoughts before we well, before I let both of you go to your respective Saturdays?
No, thanks for having me on. I think there's so many layers to playing through a game that has so much historical baggage that I think it's going to be one of these cases where it's an elephant. People are looking at it from different sides of, and there's no maybe the real perspective to take on it. But I think having different cross sections on it, and I think there's some cool stuff come out of it. So yeah, looking forward to the next conversation.
That's the original image, right? The crystal. And you see it from different angles. And but it's all light that comes through there. Well, I think that's fantastic, Wes. I'm looking forward to talking to you tomorrow.
Yeah, I just gotta say like I feel bad that I'm not playing this yet, but I also feel increasingly interested in playing it at some point when I
Hmm.
have the means and the time and I can set aside, you know, an adequate amount of attention to appreciating what they're doing with the screen. And I think, from talking to people who are younger, right, and playing these games for the first time, kids now, objectively, there's a lot of things about these games that are great and that are going to help younger generations remember them for maybe a longer amount of time. So that gives me some hope as well.
Well, all right. I think that's a good final word. Gentlemen, I'm going to stop the recording now, and it's good to talk to you.
Thanks. See you.